Alabama, 1943. For Charlie Pollard, like most black sharecroppers in the area, each day was a struggle for survival. The Great Depression had devastated everyone, but black Americans in the South were hit especially hard. Medical care was a luxury only a few could afford. But on a Sunday, Charlie noticed something new pinned to the church bulletin board. A government program offering free medical care, free meals, even burial insurance. The flyer promised treatment for bad blood, a local term used to describe everything from fatigue to anemia to venereal disease. For men who had never seen a doctor before, it seemed like a blessing. The following week, Charlie joined dozens of other men at the local schoolhouse where the government doctors had set up their clinic. What Charlie and the others didn't know was that they were being unwittingly ensnared in an experiment that had already been silently destroying black lives for more than a decade. As Charlie Pollard rolled up his sleeve for what he believed was medical help, his trust was being violated in real time. With each drop of blood drawn, he was being betrayed by the very government sworn to protect him. He had just become another victim in what would emerge as one of the worst acts of medical treachery ever perpetrated against black Americans, a deliberate, systematic exploitation that weaponized healthcare into an instrument of racial subjugation, leaving a deep mistrust toward the medical establishment. By the way, if you enjoy learning about stories like these, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. Every like helps spread our message to help right the injustices of the past. In 1932, discrimination wasn't just on the streets of America. It was ingrained into the very fabric of its medical institutions. This was done by actively reinforcing so-called scientific theories about racial differences. Textbooks and medical journals published articles claiming that black bodies functioned differently than white ones, with many physicians believing these differences required separate approaches to treatment. When it came to syphilis, a serious disease that had affected people for hundreds of years, these beliefs became especially dangerous. Doctors back then thought syphilis affected black and white people differently. They believed white patients mainly suffered brain problems because they supposedly had more developed brains. They thought black patients would have more heart and blood vessel problems instead. This wasn't real science. This was discrimination, pretending to be medicine. The U.S. Public Health Service decided to test these ideas in Macon County, Alabama, a place with many poor black Americans who couldn't get health care. They created what they called the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male. Their plan was simple but terrible. Find hundreds of black men with syphilis and just watch what happened when the disease was left untreated. But how do you get men to join such a study? Simple. You just don't tell them what you're really doing. The flyers posted in churches and community centers promised free blood test, free treatment by county health department and government doctors. You may feel well and still have bad blood. Come and bring all your family. When they finished recruiting, 600 black men had signed up. Of these, 399 had syphilis, and 201 without the disease were used for comparison. Not one was told they were part of an experiment. Not one with syphilis was told they had the disease. They were just labeled with bad blood, which doesn't really mean anything. What makes this even worse is that this wasn't the first study of untreated syphilis. Just a few years earlier, a study in Oslo, Norway looked at white patients with untreated syphilis. That study concluded that treatment was absolutely needed, and withholding it would be harmful and wrong. Yet the U.S. Public Health Service went ahead anyway. Dr. Talia Farrow Clark, who started the study, wrote, "The rather low intelligence of the Negro population, depressed economic conditions, and the common promiscuous sex relations not only contribute to the spread of syphilis, but the prevailing indifference with regards to treatment." Are you serious? Talk about a racially motivated study. Sadly, these sort of beliefs were the norm back then. What began as a 6-month study would stretch into some 40 long years. 40 long years of suffering for the unknowing victims of this vicious racist experiment. But the true magnitude of this atrocity was yet to be revealed. What happened next would transform this experiment into one of the most shameful chapters in American medical history. By 1947, medical science had made a breakthrough. Penicillin was proven to be an effective treatment for syphilis, and the U.S. Public Health Service began establishing rapid treatment centers across the country. But the government withheld the treatment and actively worked to prevent the men from receiving help from any source. When World War II came and roughly 250 of the men registered for the draft, military doctors discovered their condition and ordered treatment. The United States Public Health Service intervened, requesting these men be excluded from the draft list to keep them in the study. Dr. Raymond Vonderlehr, who directed the study, wrote to a colleague, "This study represents one of the last opportunities which the science of medicine will have to conduct an investigation of this kind. But the consequences extended far beyond just these men. The disease spread to their unknowing wives. Their children were born with it. 40 wives became infected. 19 children were born with congenital syphilis." In 1966, Peter Buxton, a public health service venereal disease investigator in San Francisco, discovered what was happening. Troubled by the ethics, he wrote to his superiors questioning the study. Their response was deeply disturbing. The CDC, which had taken over the study, concluded the study should continue until all the men had died, so their bodies could be examined during autopsies. These men were fathers, husbands, brothers, members of a community, and for decades they were betrayed by the very institution that was supposed to help them. Their story wouldn't reach the public until 1972, but by then, the damage was already done. On July 25, 1972, everything changed. Peter Buxton, frustrated by years of his concerns being ignored, leaked the information to Jean Heller, a reporter for the Associated Press. Heller would describe what she uncovered as one of the grossest violations of human rights I can imagine. The next day, her story ran on the front page of the New York Times. The public was naturally outraged, with the story triggering immediate action in Washington. Senator Edward Kennedy called for congressional hearings, where Buxton and health department officials were called to testify. The Centers for Disease Control and Public Health Service were forced to convene an advisory panel to review the study. The panel declared the study ethically unjustified and ordered its immediate termination. But the participants and their families needed more than just words. They needed justice. Fred Gray, the civil rights attorney who had previously represented Rosa Parks, stepped forward to file a class action lawsuit on behalf of the participants and their families. His goal was clear: hold the federal government accountable for decades of medical deception. In the summer of 1973, the lawsuit was settled. The government agreed to provide $10 million in compensation, plus lifetime medical benefits and burial services for the participants and affected family members through the Tuskegee Health Benefit Program. In 1974, Congress passed the National Research Act, a direct response to the horrors revealed in Tuskegee. The law created the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. This commission established fundamental principles for all future medical research. No longer could researchers conduct studies without informed consent. Every institution receiving federal funding would now need special review boards to protect human subjects. For the first time, the government was required to create clear guidelines about what researchers could and couldn't do to human subjects. The Tuskegee study's impact echoes through American healthcare even today. Research has tried to measure the study's impact on medical trust. A 1999 survey found that 80% of African American men believed the government had injected the men with syphilis. And while this specific belief wasn't accurate, the broader mistrust wasn't unfounded. Studies examining whether Black Americans would participate in medical research have shown mixed results. A 2016 study found that after the Tuskegee revelation in 1972, Black men were less likely to seek both outpatient and inpatient medical care. Their life expectancy at age 45 fell by as much as 1.4 years, accounting for about 35% of the 1980 life expectancy gap between Black and white men. But what makes this even more chilling is that this isn't ancient history. As recently as 1996, survivors were still fighting for recognition. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study Legacy Committee had to pressure the federal government to make amends. In 1997, 5 of the 8 surviving participants watched as President Bill Clinton finally issued a formal apology. What was done cannot be undone, but we can end the silence. We can stop turning our heads away. We can look at you in the eye and finally say on behalf of the American people, what the United States government did was shameful, and I am sorry. The last participant passed away in 2004. When we talk about Tuskegee, we're not talking about distant history. We're talking about something that overlapped with the age of the internet, with the war on terror, with the lives of many Americans today. For many Americans alive today, this happened during their lifetime, their parents' lifetime. It's a living memory, not a distant historical event. Some try to dismiss Tuskegee as a singular dark chapter that we've moved past. But as University of Southern California sociologist Karen Lincoln pointed out in 2021, if you say Tuskegee, then you don't have to acknowledge things like pharmacy deserts, things like poverty and unemployment. You can just say, that happened then, and there's nothing we can do about it. While Tuskegee deeply wounded trust in medical institutions, it's just one piece of a larger puzzle. Accusing only on Tuskegee can blind us to ongoing issues, like neighborhoods without pharmacies, economic barriers to healthcare, and current discrimination in medical settings. The study's legacy lives on in every medical ethics class taught today, in every institutional review board meeting, in every informed consent form signed. But perhaps its most important legacy is this: a reminder that we must remain vigilant, that protecting human dignity and human rights requires constant attention. Charlie Pollard finally learned the truth about his bad blood in 1972, 40 years after the study had began. By then, the disease had taken a devastating toll on his body, but he lived long enough to see justice begin to take shape. He lived to hear a president apologize, and to know that his suffering would help protect future generations from experiencing the same betrayal. This was Black Stories Untold, and as always, thanks for watching.